All right, let me do some quick housekeeping. We had an incredible session with Layla Ali. That was a great way to kick off the year. We followed that up with Chuck Patterson, who, the Nick Woodson, the CEO of GoPro, calls him the greatest multi-sport extreme athlete of all time. Coming up on the 13th, and Rick will like this, a former PJ, Robert Hamilton Owens, is doing his office hours. You guys know RHO really well. I always say, Robert makes the Dos Equis guy look pretty boring. And for those of you who don't know Robert, at 71 years old, he rode over 40 days straight across the Atlantic to raise money for veteran suicide. So he is just an absolutely special human being, and we're blessed to have him as one of our advisors in the Outlier Project. On the 18th, we've got Nick Lavery. Nick is a current Green Beret, but his distinction is that he is the first ever above-the-knee amputee to re-qualify and go back into special operations. Nick is a very, very unique guy, and I'm excited to spend an hour with him. And on the 20th, we're going to a place that Rick Prado knows really well. We're going to Nicaragua to support Peter Shaler and Rayo de Sol. So I'm really excited about that trip, and we're going to help to refurbish a school that is in major disrepair in Matagalpa. So really looking forward to that. Right now, you spent a ton of time there. The format for anyone who's new to one of these events, it's a 30-30 format. So Rick and I are going to do like a little fireside chat for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to open it up to live Q&A. So whatever you want to ask, just drop in the chat that you have a question. You don't have to write out the question. Kathy will let me know, and then we'll tee you up with Rick. But you talk about an incredible opportunity. This is an incredible opportunity. You very rarely get an opportunity to peek behind this curtain. So, Rick is a 24-year CIA vet. He was a counterterrorist chief of operations. This book that he wrote, Black Ops, The Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior, is a New York Times bestseller. I know we've got a lot of authors on this call, and I think you guys appreciate how hard it is to make the New York Times bestseller list. It is nearly impossible. So that alone is a major achievement, and we'll get into some of his thoughts on writing the book. But Rick, we are absolutely thrilled to have you. So welcome to the Outlier Project.
Thank you for having me, guys. I really, really appreciate it.
So I'm going to start pretty basic because I've listened to other interviews with people that are kind of in the world that you lived in, and it's filled with things that people in that world understand. But I truly believe that if I pump truth serum into everybody on this call, a lot of us really wouldn't know a lot about the CIA. So this kind of peek behind the curtain is pretty unusual. So I guess I think for a lot of us, the CIA or things like that, we think of Jason Bourne, we think of James Bond, we think of stuff like that. Some of it may be accurate, some of it not accurate. But let's talk first about what in the world is the CIA and what is Black Ops?
Well, first of all, CIA, I'm glad that not everybody knows everything that's going on in CIA. That's not our mission. There are things that need to be kept locked up. My book was completely revised and approved by the agency. I'm surprised some of the stuff they left in. They did take out some juicy stuff, and there's some things that I didn't even want to talk about. But the agency is unique in that we are the only ones that have what is called Title 50 authorities. Title 50 authorities means that the President of the United States can find a finding, whether lethal or otherwise, that would authorize us to do anything that he or she tells us to do. And that's unique. The military has Title 10 authorities, which means they can do anything they want with the proper approvals in war zones. So perfect example is when we were able to finally capture Osama bin Laden and shoot him in the face, as they say. That SEAL team was actually detail lead 2s of the CIA, because Pakistan is not a war theater for us. So it needed those Title 50 authorities. So it was the unit that I started back in 1996 that finally caught him several years later. But those SEALs were under our purview and under our mandate.
What about Black Ops? I think Black Ops is a mythical kind of. I'm not sure everyone really knows what's Black Ops.
Well, everybody has different versions of it. Obviously, there's even video games that are called Black Ops, nothing related to me. But for us in the agency, Black Ops are those operations where the U.S. hand has to be hidden. Those are the most sensitive of the jobs that we do now. Obviously, our men and women on the State Department or business cover or DOD cover overseas are actually doing clandestine work that we can't afford to get exposed. But in our case, Black Ops means where you're actually starting a mission that is targeting a particular threat, and the U.S. hand has to be kept out of it. And that was my start with the Nicaraguan program, which was actually stayed pretty black for a couple of years.
And so how do you guys work with the FBI and, special operations? Do you do anything with the Secret Service? I know they're domestic. You guys are international. I guess just help us to have a better understanding of how the CIA, the FBI, military, how do you guys work together?
Well, national security is a team sport. And anybody who tells you otherwise is not in the business. There's certain people that do something very well, but you got to rely on others. I did most of my time in the agency in the counterterrorism center. Our counterterrorist center has federal representation of every single agency in the government. We have Secret Service guys attached to us. We have DEA. We have diplomatic security, and on and on and on. And FBI representatives also. As a matter of fact, the deputy for law enforcement at the counterterrorist center is always a senior FBI officer. I think the FBI and our relationship is often exaggerated, the animosity or the competition or whatever. First of all, you got to understand that we have different goals at the end of our professional end, okay? They want to put collar on somebody, bring him to trial, and convict him. I love it. We don't have arrest authorities. All we could do is disrupt a threat or neutralize the threat. And thus our recruiting and our running of people is very different. We may run somebody that they would love to get their hands on because they're in the periphery of a criminal organization. The difference is they would get this guy, they would arrest him, they would bring him in, interrogate him, put him in front of a judge, and make him spill his beans. Well, we take that same guy and we run him covertly for 5-10 years, and he swims up that organization, and we get the kind of information that saves lives. It makes it no less or no more important than what the FBI does, but it is a part of the collage. Secret Service plays a big role for us too. DS, diplomatic security folks. So it is a team sport.
Rick, I mean, this book is unbelievable, and I think it's cool that they kept some of the redacted stuff in there in terms of just being blacked out. I guess for somebody who, as you said, lived in the shadows for decades and were doing a ton of covert missions, how gut-wrenching was it to decide to write a book, to peel back the curtain? Obviously, it has to get approval, but what was that like for you, for somebody who's lived in private, to now kind of be public and put this book out there? And what was the motivation for writing it?
Well, you touched on the motivation, the Jason Bourne aspect of the reputation. I wish he was more like James Bond. That's the best op the Brits ever pulled. But for us, being represented by the likes of Jason Bourne, don't get me wrong, the movies are fun. They got good tactics. They fight like hell. But that's nothing like what we do. We're not maniacal assassins with 17 different personalities that are being chased by our own government because we were doing black. It just goes on and on and on. So I never ever thought of having the title of author, much less best-selling author, next to my name. I always wanted to be in the special side of the military. That's how I got into pararescue. I always wanted to be in the intelligence community. Yes, I read every James Bond novel growing up as a 13, 14-year-old kid. But the title, the moniker of author was never there. There's one of my bosses, he was the director of the Counterterrorism Center when I was his chief of ops during 9/11. And when I retired and then he retired, I brought him to Blackwater. I had moved to Blackwater. I was doing the same thing, but now through, for the government, but through Blackwater when I retired. And Kofor was adamant that I needed to write a book. And he kept telling me, your family history, your story. And I kept saying, Kofor, I'm not going to write a book. That's just not me. And finally, he cornered me one day. I guess I was complaining about the reputation our agency has in the media. And he said, well, why don't you do something about it? And, the tipping point in my process of getting ready for, because once you pull the plug, it's like jumping out of an airplane, once you're out, you're out. The thing that really tipped the hand for me was one of the times I visited headquarters again, and they had added more stars to our wall. And you have to understand, CIA is this big compared to FBI or militaries like this. And within the components of the agency, the director of operations is even tinier. It's maybe a fifth, if that, of the agency. And we have 141 stars on that wall, and almost a third are post 9/11. That means those are people that I knew and or sent into harm's way. So what the tipping point for me was the fact that I wanted the widows of some of these individuals to be able to put something in front of their kids that said, this is what daddy really did during the war. That was kind of like the impetus for it. I'm also an avid anti-communist. So I've fought them in 5 different incarnations professionally, but I beat that drum every chance I get. So.
And that all stems from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old Enrique Prado in Cuba. Tell us about your time in Cuba and what happened when you were 10.
I had an idyllic life. I had a horse before I had a bicycle. Then I got a bicycle. I had a BB gun at the age of 6 because I lived in a small town and you could shoot mice or whatever the heck you wanted to shoot. And that really changed very quickly come 1959. But I think I was about 7 years old when the revolution was starting to foment. And the town that I lived was at the foothills of the Escambray Mountains, which is where Che Guevara, the infamous Che Guevara, was holding, that was his command post. And so they would run raids to the town that I was at because there was an army and a police garrison there. And I think I was 7 or 8 the first time that I saw a real firefight. And my parents were out of town. They had gone to dinner to the Capitol, and I was with a nanny, and I hear all these gunshots, and being an adventurous 7-year-old or 8-year-old, whatever I was, I go up to the window and I open up the jealousy, and I see people shooting at each other. There's a guy on the road over there bleeding, but I'm soaking all this in, and at the same time I'm kind of in shock because there's something very new. You get that tunnel vision aspect. And then what I didn't notice, that behind the parapet there was this guy with an automatic rifle, and he hops up and lets off a charge. And that's when the nanny grabbed me and dragged me back into the backside of the house. But I think that the biggest step after that was having to leave Cuba by myself to come to this wonderful country. And if I highlight anything in the book, my number one is I have lived a blessed life, and my parents paid the price for it. Imagine taking a 10-year-old son, the only child that you have, your only child, at the age of 10, and putting them in an airplane to a country that you may never even be able to visit. And not for economic reasons, okay? We were middle class. My dad had a 57 Pontiac. He had a deuce and a half on a Jeep for his business. We had a TV at the house and a phone. We moved to the United States. We were under the poverty line for at least the first 3 years. So he put his only child, and I say he because my mom fought him for quite a while until she gave in, send me to the United States for freedom. Nothing more innate than freedom.
And then you lived in an orphanage for a bit.
Yeah, my first 9 months or 10 months in the United States were in an orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. Pueblo, Colorado, if anybody knows, is still a blue-collar town. You can imagine back in 1962. So luckily, I like horses because that's about the only place they would take us was to the rodeos. But that was, that was a growing up fast kind of experience. And, once you retire, you get a little older like myself, and you have time for introspection. You realize that God puts a path in front of you, but he also prepares you. And if you pay the price of admission, you have a good life, which I have. But just thinking about the fact that at an early age, I saw violence. I saw what communism does to a family, to a country, how eviscerating, how totalitarian that is, to going into an orphanage where you have 3 or 4 different languages, 3 or 4 different nationalities, and a bunch of pissed off kids, because who wants to be in an orphanage, right? So, and so on and so on. Pararescue was another big chapter in forging my sword. But I'm a firm believer, now that I have the time to look back, that every left hook that I got in life led me to where I'm at, and I wouldn't change a thing.
So then you did spend time as a PJ, which for anyone who doesn't know, pararescue in the Air Force is the equivalent of being a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret at Special Operations. And you did that, and you decided to leave. Tell us why you left.
Well, I went into the military in 1971, December of 71, with the purpose of going to Vietnam. I grew a conscience very early on, right after high school, beginning of college. I grew a conscience and realized that I owed this country an incredible debt of honor, and I was willing to pay it. So I went into the military with that concept of going to Vietnam. Well, pararescue training, like most of special operations training, is lengthy. So by the time I got my beret, I think it was early 73, Vietnam was pretty much over. So I was I was active for 2 years. I went to the reserves. And then I joined the fire department as a paramedic, because pararescuemen are ninja paramedics. They jump out of airplanes, they climb mountains, they shoot things, but primarily they're very, very capable paramedics. So I joined the fire department. I did that for 6 years. I stayed in the reserves till 1980. I left pararescue in 76, and primarily was because I didn't have a purpose. Now, don't get me wrong. I was having a blast, wearing a cool hat, all kinds of stuff on your chest. You're jumping out of airplanes, you're flying helicopters, all this good stuff. But it was training for training's sake. And I wanted to make a difference. So I left and went to the 20th Special Forces C Company out of Fort Lauderdale at the time. And I was waiting to go through the Q course, the qualification course. I had applied to the agency, handwritten letter, actually the first time. Second time I typed it. And primarily the first time they weren't hiring is during the firing phase post-Vietnam in the agency. And then they called me up in 1980 to a contract, to do some contract work for them as a paramedic working with our Special Activities Division of the CIA, which is our special forces. That is our Special Operations Forces. And everybody that's in there comes from Navy SEALs, Air Force Pararescue, Combat Controllers, Green Berets, Marine Raiders. So when Reagan took over in 1981 is when he signed the finding about fighting communism in our backyard, and that including supporting the counter-revolutionaries that were fighting the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And to show you the level of attrition that the agency had at the time, just like the military post-Vietnam, they didn't have a single native Spanish-speaking paramilitary officer. They had paramilitary officers that were great, but they were not Spanish speakers or could pull off being Latino. They had, case officers that could pull off being Latinos, but they didn't have the paramilitary background necessary to do what I did for over 3 years in the jungles there. So that was my foot in the door, because going back to your very first question, that is the black op. We needed to hide the hand of the U.S. So I was there as a Honduran major. I still have a photo of my ID, that was the beginning of the career.
And so your career in the CIA, really, I think of it as two sections. It was the Cold War, fighting communism, and then it was the age of terrorism. I guess talk to us about the highlights of each section of that career and maybe how they were different. Obviously, starting with the Cold War era.
Well, the Cold War for me started, besides the Cuba angle at the beginning, with the Nicaragua program, where I was brought into that. And that was a very rewarding job. I lived in the camps. I was there for a little over 3 years, 3 months. I slept in a jungle hammock Monday through Friday for those 3 years. I would come home on the weekends. Eventually I got married. My wife and I had met in Miami, and we got married. She came down, all in Alias. Our baby was born in Alias. Our first oldest son was born in Alias.
What does that mean, Rick? Born in Alias?
We are under fake cover. I mean, I was there as Alex Mendez. My U.S. passport said Alex Mendez, and my official passport said Alex Mendez. And then the locals gave me the Major Alex Mendez, being a native. But we often travel or do special operations using alias names, because we may be contaminated by association with the agency, or if word gets out and people start looking for you, at least you're protecting your true persona.
Fascinating. And then so after kind of that Cold War era, they decided it was a good idea for you to start chasing a guy named Osama bin Laden. Tell us about that, because you co-founded that effort.
Yeah, again, I was always blessed with being at the right place at the right time, or the wrong time, whichever way you want to look at it. I came out of the Contra program in 1984, finished my college. I'm a graduate of George Mason, went to spy school, and started my career as a case officer. Before that, I was only a paramilitary officer. Then I became what we call a PMO, paramilitary case officer. One of the things that was offered to me, I was a branch chief. I had come back from Korea. I just got my GS-15. And about 2 months later, they called me in and they said, we want to, your name has been raised to be the deputy chief of station for a special task force chasing a very bad individual. Are you interested? I'm going like, yeah, of course. And they said, I said, who are we after? And my boss says, Osama bin Laden. And my response was, who? And he says, exactly. We need to find out more. So in January of 1996, we stood up what became Alex Station. And that is the same little unit. We were actually 8 analysts, 6 of them were females, and some of the best people I've ever worked with. I was the senior ops officer and deputy of the task force. We had an FBI guy and an Arabic-speaking case officer, super good guy. So there was only like 10 of us, maybe 11 that we had with Mike Scheuer, who was the chief. He was an analyst. I was a senior ops guy. So that is the very same unit that fast forward to, I think it was 2011 that we finally got bin Laden. That's the same unit. I'm very proud of that. We had quite a reunion for the original Plank owners when that happened. So much celebrated.
You guys got very close to him, and I know from the book there was opportunities to maybe eliminate him or take him as a hostage. Tell us what happened over that period of time when you guys were so close.
Well, it all started in the early 90s, probably around 93. A very good friend of mine, a Green Beret legend, CIA legend, Billy Waugh. And Billy and I were friends. We became friends very early on and stayed together until he passed away a couple of years ago. But Billy had been doing surveillance in Khartoum looking for a guy named Carlos the Jackal, who he eventually found and we were able to turn over to the French. But there he started doing surveillance on bin Laden. The first photographs that we had that were non-media related or Afghanistan related were taken covertly by Billy Waugh. And Billy, we used to do surveillance on him almost every day. And so when we started the task force, I immediately called Billy in and said, I know you were doing this, fill me in. We started looking at the traffic. And we came to the conclusion that, and based on, like I said, based on a legendary Green Beret guy, so this is not just Jason Bourne concoctions, right? That we could either kidnap or neutralize this guy during those early years. And by 97, early 98, we had him coming and going. We knew what he was doing. We had all kinds of intelligence from liaison services, unilateral, volunteers, technical, and overhead that pretty much told you exactly what he was doing. He was building a terrorist army. So we kept proposing these things up the ladder, and that current administration was not. We don't have enough evidence. We don't have enough evidence, and we kept telling them, so look, the job of the CIA is not to retaliate. The job of the CIA is to preempt and disrupt threats to the United States. Anybody can pay somebody back for having screwed you over, but you already hurt. So, but that went on and on and on. And, Scott, the thing that really sticks in my craw is imagine if I would have been allowed to neutralize bin Laden in 1998. It'd be like shooting Hitler in 1938 or 1939. The coal, the embassy bombings in Africa, even 9/11. So, it was a very fun job to do, but it was very frustrating. And it ruined a couple of careers. The guy who was the senior analyst, Mike Scheuer, brilliant guy. He kind of went off the deep end and after the embassy bombings and threatened the DCI and all kinds of stuff that, the blood of these Americans are in your hands. I don't think that was fair because it wasn't our DCI turning that stuff down. It was the administration. But nonetheless, it was very painful for all of us to see those occurrences and knowing for a fact. My friend Billy Waugh told me one day, he says, Rick, I got so close to him, I could have killed him with a pencil. And if you knew Billy Waugh, look up Billy Waugh, you'll know that he could do that. So, could do that. So, yeah.
So 9/11, I think for all of us was probably a day that we will never forget. What was that? I can't even imagine, Rick, what that day was like for you.
Yeah, quite emotional for all of us. Obviously, we all know exactly where we were at when 9/11 happened. But for me, it was a little deeper because, like I just said, I was embedded into this program very early on that could have resolved the problem. So I was chief of operations at the counter-terrorist center when 9/11 happened. I had become the chief the chief of operations in May of 2001. So I had 3 months or 4 months to look at things, and we knew we were going to get hit. We knew that there was something coming. But unlike the Jason Bourne movies where CIA and the intelligence communities knows everything, in reality, intel is more of a puzzle. And you get these little pieces from these little pieces from signal intelligence, human intelligence, signal intelligence, volunteers, whatever it is, and you build up you start to put that puzzle together, and you start guessing, are they dogs or cats in the picture? And eventually, hopefully, you come up with the right solution. So it was very, very frustrating for me to see the level of chatter. We call it chatter. The amount of information that was coming in is like they're coming to do something. We were convinced that it was in the United States, but we could not do anything about it. We did not have the capability of disrupting, because by then he was in Afghanistan, and if he would have been in Khartoum, it would have been an easy day. But by then he was in a cave in Afghanistan running things from there, and not until the war where we were able to start chasing him with that intensity. But it's life changing. I mean, I didn't go home for 3 days. I literally slept in my office for 3 days. I would go shower in the gym, and because we were working 20 hours a day, napping where we needed to, and it wasn't just me. It was the whole CTC. And I'll take a second to honor my brethren from that time frame, because that fourth airplane that was brought down by very brave Americans that said, "Let's go, let's roll." The community's opinion was that they were probably looking at CIA for the next the target, because they hit our commercial in New York, they hit our military, the Pentagon. What else makes sense? And the joke was, well, if they hit Congress, it wouldn't make any difference anyway. So it was probably us, right? So there was an evacuation order. Everybody in the building of CIA was ordered to leave. Nobody in CTC left.
Amazing.
They put, including a very dear friend of mine who was 8 months pregnant at the time, and she was deputy chief of the Hezbollah branch. And it was like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. I go back to my office probably for the first time, and there she is at the computer. I said, "Christy, what the hell are you doing here?" She says, "Well, everybody thinks it's bin Laden, but until now, Hezbollah has killed more. And I just I said, "You're 8 months pregnant. I've delivered 2 kids and none of them were mine. I ain't doing a third." But the reason that I love that story, guys, is, imagine the professionalism and the conviction to a mission that you can actually block the maternal instinct of protecting that 8-month kid. And you're sitting in a potentially targeted building trying to get answers for the community. If that doesn't, showcase the kind of people that are really in the agency and not the Jason Bourne type, nothing does. Nothing does.
I think it's hard for any of us to wrap our heads around the level of commitment and the level of patriotism that people like yourself have. There's a funny story in the book about, I think they sent you to a psychiatrist because they were like, this guy keeps going from like hot seat to hot seat to hot seat and like raising his hand like, yeah, send me. Tell us a little bit about that. And then I think for everybody, how in the world how do you manage your stress? How do you handle that?
Well, two good questions. The stress part was actually the easier one. I think, like I said, we're wired at birth, and our metal is forged along the way. I was brought up as my dad was originally a cowboy before he went to business, before my mom domesticated him. So I grew up with that ethos, what cowboy up, So So for me, that part of it was the easiest. But the biggest reason it was easy was because I truly believed that what I was doing was going to make a difference. And when you are doing something that you put so much value in, God also gives you the courage to pull it off. I'm a firm believer in that. And I think that was, I never felt stressed. I never felt stressed. Even whether it was in a senior management job or out in the field chasing some bad guy, which I did for many, many years, I never felt stressed. I was OCD about my operations, and I was coming home alive, and I was coming home clean. I wasn't going to draw any heat to my family, because you realize 5 of those tours that I did overseas, 5 of my 6 overseas tours were with my family, because I was there as under State Department cover. So I really had to live my cover in order to protect my family. I digress. What was the first question was? You said the stress.
Well, how in the world you just manage that stress? But I guess I was just saying, the infamous story of them saying when you had to go see the psychiatrist, they were like, "What this guy is."
I had just gone out of I had gone from the Contra to a Latin American, South American country where it was my first counterterrorism center job. That was my first counterterrorist job. And I recruited a terrorist there, and we got into all kinds of crap. And they asked me if I wanted to go to the Philippines and do the same thing, and I said yes. So the shrinks called me in, and of course, shrinks love to play games with them. I remember this guy took his shoe off, and he was picking at his socks or something stupid just to see if he could get a reaction out of me. He's like Mickey Mouse. But he asked me, he says, we're concerned because you're going from this tour to the. And I looked at him in honesty. I wasn't being a smart ass for a change. I told him honestly, I said, I thought that's why you hired me. I didn't come here to I never thought of climbing the ladder. I started the agency in a contract as an E7. I retired as a 2-star general in the agency. I swear on a stack of Bibles, I never planned my career. I always chased the job. I always chased that one job that was going to make me pertinent in my world, and then letting me know that I was making a difference.
I mean, thank God for people like you. Are you at this point, are you an optimist or a pessimist about our future?
I'm a full optimist. I mean, you can't, I've been an optimist since I set foot in this country. This country offers the last ray of hope. The day that God gives up on the United States, he's given up on the world. So it is very, 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 very important. I'm an optimist. I think that if you look at American history, I love history. And if you look at the downtimes that we've had, the atrocities of World War II, what our people suffered in World War I, and so on and so on and so on, the political ramifications and stuff, Pearl Harbor, all these things that we have suffered, the Great Depression, and we bounce back. Now, obviously, ships can only tilt so much before they sink. So we do have to, get the right rudder going and get our country back in shape. But I am an optimist, and I think we can swing it. And I pray to God that we could swing it, because, like I said, if not, where am I going to go to? If this country goes down the tube, where am I going to send my grandson? There ain't nobody else but the U.S.
Incredible. Well, we've got a lineup of people that would love to ask you a question. You ready to field some questions?
I don't know.
We're going to Bruce in Portland first.
Rick, thank you so much for spending such great quality time with us. Incredible stories. My question's a little off topic, but kind of fascinating subject. I'm wondering, to what extent does the CIA get involved with investigating UAPs or UFOs, and what are your thoughts on that, especially all the drone activity over New Jersey?
That's not our purview. I mean, the agency does build drones. We have a very specific division in the agency that is our high-tech individuals that come up with some, really incredible ideas. But that's not our bailiwick. We don't, first of all, anything happening in the United States, we do not operate in the United States. We operate overseas. That job is more for NSA and the rest of the communities. But no, the agency plays a very, very small role, if any at all, in that whole phenomenon.
Do you have an opinion on the topic?
No, I mean, as an intel officer, I seldom have opinions, because if I can't base it on fact, I keep my mouth shut. I've never really researched that topic. I've never been involved with it. Do I believe that there's other life outside of ours? Absolutely. God talks about the universe. He doesn't talk about the United States, So that there may be life out there. Yeah, I hope so. And I hope it's friendly. But I have no real insight or passion for that.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Jeannie Gervin.
I cannot hear her.
No, she's on mute. I think she's trying to find it.
Oh, okay.
I don't think.
Okay, finally.
There you go.
Worked. First of all, I want to say thank you for your service, Rick. My dad worked in another agency on domestic and international terrorist groups. So my question to you, well, I have a couple, which were, one, was your cover ever in jeopardy? And if so, what precautions did you have to take for your family? And what was it like for your kids to come back from an alias to their real names?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, starting with the kids, our youngest son, our oldest son, was literally a baby when I was in Honduras and in alias. So when we came back overseas, I mean, he was still a little kid. His name was Alex, which was my alias, and is Alex. But they never had to live undercover after that. I obviously professionally did most of my work, even if I was in country X. As Enrique Prado attached to the embassy, when I went operational, I was there as Joe McGillicuddy from wherever the heck my paperwork said that I was. My cover being blown, that I know of, no. There was, during the Contra program, there was information that we were intercepting that the Sandinistas knew that there was this Latino guy that wasn't really Honduran, and he was the one that was bringing in all the logistics and the training, because for the first 14 months of that program, I was the only CIA officer allowed to go to the camps. After it became a gray op versus a black op, then we started bringing in our special activity divisions folks. So obviously the precautions was, carry more bullets and bone up on your trade craft. I mean, for us in the agency, if you're pulling your weapon, chances are you've already screwed up. So the weapon is there as your parachute. You don't want to have to jump out of an airplane, out of an airliner. But that's what our weapon is for us in the most part, unless we're doing a kinetic operation or something more of a capture and kill kind of stuff. But it never changes the fact that tradecraft is what keeps us alive.
Good stuff. Eva.
Wow, this is powerful. I appreciate you, and I am in awe of all that you've done. Thank you so much. I have a question for what your wife and your children, did they have to train for their own protection? Did they have to walk around, or your wife, did she have to have a gun? What was that like for her? And then if that was, how does she keep her nervous system kind of calm in a crisis?
Excellent question. And I love when that question comes up, because look, I've been married 42 and a half years. Any woman that could put up with a guy like me with my kind of lifestyle for 42 years, descends, not sainthood, Buddhahood, right? But I had an ace up my sleeve, is that my wife is also Cuban. She lived under communism. She saw the same atrocities. She saw the same damage done to her family. So she was a believer. She did not know, it's funny, after she read the book, she learned about 80% more about my life than she knew. And every once in a while, she would walk in my office and look at me and go, really? And I go, yeah, whatever chapter you're on is real. So she, and if you read the book, there are some incidents there where she did go operational for us. The kids, we keep them in the dark because they're too young to cope with those things. Both my sons have been in service to this country on their own accord, not because of any coaching from my end. But they were protected by my tradecraft, by our security. My wife did have some training because she had to have basic training on being alert. But you know, it's funny. It's something you inculcate in your kids anyway, because even when my kids were like 6 and 7 years old, we would go to a restaurant and the oldest would always tell the youngest, nope, that's where dad sits. They knew exactly where in the restaurant I was going to sit. And as they grew older, and I was able to, sensitize them, not so much, hey, look, I'm a spy for the CIA, but we live in a very violent world. We're living overseas. There are dangers here. These are the kind of things that you do to survive. And the biggest tool a person can have is awareness. So my wife coped with it incredibly well because she was a believer just like I was.
Jared, you're up.
Hey, Rick, very grateful for your service. This has been a very cool hour today. I have a very close friend that is a federal agent. We had some interesting conversations the last couple of years where he actually kind of believed that some of the people in position of power in his agency were starting to not act in the best interest of the American people, thought that they were kind of making some weird decisions, kind of things that they weren't really believing in. And I'm wondering, is this a moral dilemma that you ever came across in your time in service? And if so, how did you handle a situation where you thought, some of the top people might have been compromised?
In my personal experience, not so much. A lot of this damage was done after I left. There were the years where all of a sudden the agencies were becoming politicized. And I have said this forever. You cannot run special missions, special operations, or covert action or intelligence collection through a political optic. You have to run it through an operational optic. And then let the politicians say yes or no, because we do work under the auspices of our bosses. But no, I really believe that's about the extent of it. We there was so much politicization of that kind of crap going on, especially the last 8-10 years or more. The agency was really politicized. They were, I think it started with the Iraq incident. The fact that these weapons of mass destruction that were never found. Now there were chemical and there were other stuff, and that is technically considered. But I think that was more of an excuse. Again, this is just an educated opinion. But even back then, there was some misleading information. And now when you actually have that some of the letters that were signed and some of the accusations that were made were literally just obfuscating the truth to present an optic that was convenient at the time for whoever your masters were. So it is endemic. I really, really, really hope that we can turn it all around, both for the FBI, for the Secret Service, for every agency, including the military, because we do not serve a political party. We serve the President of the United States of America. Whoever he or she is, that's who we salute. That's who we obey. That's who we, support. I may not agree with it, but to show you the change, just imagine the change. When I was in, you were not allowed to have a political sticker on your car. You couldn't say I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a this, I'm a that. No, that was not authorized. That was forbidden. So to go from that to politicizing intelligence to benefit an untruth, that is criminal. And the folks that led those efforts, some of them are paying the price because they've gotten their clearances revoked. So, yeah, great question though. Thank you.
Amy, you're up.
Well, first of all, sir, thank you so much for your service. I'm from a military family, including my son served overseas, and I know the dangers you guys deal with every day. I can't even imagine like what your danger situation was with you being so high level into the government. I guess my question, because I try to help my son who's recovering still from an injury a couple years ago, is how do you keep your perspective when things have just been really difficult in your line of work? And how do you keep the faith that you talked about so passionately through this whole presentation?
Yeah, for me, faith is what we earned. Through life you go, and when you look back at even your bad times, you see that they led to the path that you were supposed to take to begin with. Um, Coping with something like an injury like that for your family member, it is very traumatic because any way you put it, there's something they got to come out of. As far as dealing with it, again, I think that people that get into the kind of world that we live in, my world, some of your family members' world, have a different wiring. They've been tested in ways that the average individual is not tested. Physically, mentally, spiritually, you're challenged. But I think that there is deep inside of us, there's a ain't dead, can't quit kind of attitude. And that is very important for that recovery. It's just, I'm fortunately that, my kids have had combat tours, and luckily, other than, seeing what they saw, they came out physically unhurt. But it is very difficult. But like in everything else in life, you can't quit. You cannot quit. It's just that. And I think the example that Scott mentioned, the Green Beret that he's going to have on the program here in a couple of sessions, is the perfect example of what can be done. I mean, this guy getting back, you know what it takes to get into a Green Beret operational scenario? And this guy goes back to it. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, incredible. Susie, you're up.
Hola, Enrique. Mucho gusto.
Yeah, qué placer.
So my question to you, my dad was also Green Beret, Airborne, Career Army, born in Cuba. And so my question to you is, have you been back to Cuba since Castro took place? And would you say, if you have, would you say it's safe for us obviously I know there's an embargo now and everything, there's other ways to get there. Would you say it's safe for Americans in Cuba?
First of all, it's not safe for me. I mean, can you imagine? They know who I am. Well, right. They probably read the book too. But even before that, I was chief of station, deputy chief of station. That your name is out there and compromised by the bad guys. If I was to go to Cuba, as much as I would love to visit being the operative word,
right,
and go to where my grandparents are buried and where my original house was, that nostalgia is there. But can you imagine the headlines? CIA, former Cuban defector, CIA senior guy smuggling cocaine because they would put a gram of coke in my suitcase and I'd be done for 20 years in the jail. So me and my family, we do not contemplate that. That said, my wife and I talk about it all the time, that if there is a true change of government, that we would go back for the same reasons and take our kids and show them where we grew up, get them acquainted to their roots. As far as safe, the answer is yes and no. It depends if you just go to one of these little tours that they take you to the areas where they want you to see. That 10% of renovated old Havana, that if you walk around the back of the building, there is none, that kind of stuff. Crime is growing there because of necessity.
Right.
People are literally starving in that country now. They've lost the amount of money that Russia was pumping into it. That's been diminished. Venezuela is in no shape to be floating anybody. So there's a lot of petty crime. I mean, there was one in the news last year that really shocked me. Was a priest had a little scooter, and he got stabbed and killed because they took a scooter. So, but the other part of it is, especially you with your dad being a Cuban born and knowing the price that culture paid. I wouldn't put a penny on Castro's pocket. I love cigars. I have never bought a Cuban cigar.
Yeah.
I just won't do it because it's not the people that you're helping by going down there.
Right.
It is the nomenclature of the country, excuse me, that runs that. But say hello to your dad for me and thank him for his service.
Thank you. And thank you for your service.
All right. We're going to Barry and then we're going to Courtney to wrap things up.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thank you for all you've done for this country, this great country of ours. So my question is, I'm sure I haven't read your book. I just ordered it though. It's on it, so I'm about to start, but I'm sure there's stories in there that you haven't, or there's not stories in there that you would tell. And I guess my question is there any story you want to share or event or something that happened that you would tell people and you say, I can't make this shit up, right? It's just like so unbelievable and crazy that's like the first thing you tell people when you tell the story.
Well, I can talk about anything that's in the book. And like I said, I was surprised at the many things that they did leave in. I was disappointed with some of the stuff that they took out. And like you yourself said, there's things that I wouldn't want to talk about, period. But there are two incidents here. First of all was the coolest paramilitary operation I ever was in, is when I put together a team of Mosquito. They were the Native Americans of Nicaragua, Mosquito Indians that were lobster divers. I made them into, Contra Navy SEALs. Went through all the training, half of them didn't make it. And at the end of our training session, we were able to sneak into Puerto Cabezas, which was at the time the port that was the belly button with Cuba for all the military assistance that was coming in, including oil and stuff. And we blew that pier up with 80 pounds of C4. So that was pretty sexy. That was a lot of fun. There's another one that is just as poignant, and I use it as a teaching aid. I do a lot of work with the military and the local police because everybody talks about going to the range and practicing, that's all very important if you're in the business. But awareness is the single biggest weapon that we carry. And the story that I like to tell to reinforce that concept is that we were in the Philippines. I was the chief liaison. In other words, I was the CIA's referent to their Green Berets, their Navy SEALs, their guys in the Philippines and in the intelligence services. And we were in, I think it was Davao, Cebu or Davao, but I think it was Davao, one of the outlying little cities. And we were training the guys there because the New People's Army was very active in the Philippines at the time. And the Abu Sayyaf's Islamic radicals were starting down in Mindanao. And we were coming out of a restaurant. We've been working all day. We've been a 12-hour day like usual, coming out, had a beer and a sandwich, and it was 6 of us. It was 2 Filipino Green Beret officers, 2 of our techs, our CIA techs, who have training. I mean, they're not operations officers, but they do have a degree of training. And me and my good friend Davis, who was a Vietnam vet, and he was a case officer. So we walk out of the restaurant. I'm the last guy. Davis is the second to last guy that walks out of the restaurant. And corner of my eyes, I see 3 guys. They're in a little huddle like this. They're about maybe 20, 30 yards from us. And as soon as we came out, they got 3 abreast and started walking, stopped talking and started walking across. There was a modus operandi of the Sparrows. It was a hit team that the FPA had. They would carry a pistol, a 1911 A1 45 caliber in their crotch, no holster, hammer taped back, and they would hold it up with their left pocket, with their left hand in their pocket. They would push the gun up, grab it, shoot you, put it back in, and walk off. And they were ghosts. So these three guys, the two on the outside, guess what? They had their left hand in their pocket. And the one in the middle was the one that was making eye contact. The other guys were not looking at us. So I drew my weapon. And of course, at the time, what I did not know was that my friend had also drawn his weapon. There's a phenomenon when you are in this kind of thing that you get tunnel vision and auditory exclusion. He might have been telling me, "Are you seeing this?" And I couldn't hear him. And all I could see was these three guys. But we drew our weapons. And guys, if you walk up to anybody in any street and you draw a weapon, what is their reaction? Whoa, like what the hell is this? These individuals didn't even bat an eye. And the guy in the middle just looked at us and went like, "Okay, we'll get you next time." And we looked back and said, "No, you won't." But I teach that lesson because everybody wants to train in the cool ninja stuff. But the stuff that keeps you to having to use those tools is awareness. So
Right on. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. That's awesome.
What a story. Courtney, you're our cleanup hitter. Take us
Sorry,
home.
and I know we're out of time. I'll be really quick. I was really intrigued by what you said about the different politicians that come in and out, and how your service has to be consistent and non-politicized. There's so much talk though lately, and we see it daily, about the polarization of American society. Have you seen an increase in the kind of whiplash back and forth policies? Do you see a danger in that in your line of work? And is that becoming more of a reality?
Well, it's been there forever. You got to understand that a lot of the division that exists in this country is fomented by our enemies. Every culture has internal frictions, but Khrushchev told us very early on, "We will destroy you from within." They know militarily nobody's going to be willing to pay the price to confront the United States. We have the highest trained and most vetted for 20 some years military. But a lot of the problems that we're having are actually people fomenting those features. It's like putting explosives in a crack in a wall. That's been the exacerbating the natural tensions that exist in any country that has multinational individuals, multicultural individuals, and economic changes too. So is it getting better? Is it getting worse? It's too early to tell. I do believe that one of the things that prevents being in harm's way is being taken for serious. Having conviction. And the short answer of it is, during the Jimmy Carter years, as soon as Jimmy Carter was a wonderful guy, great American, Christian, senior military officer, all that, and but he was very naive, and he came across as food. Immediately, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. The Iranians take our hostages for 444 days. In comes Reagan, and the very next day, our hostages are back in the United States. They took him seriously. They knew that he was not going to allow his people to stay there and suffer any longer. So I am an optimist. I do believe that we're hopefully starting to go back in the right way. But we have to find the center. We have to find our center. The far right and the far left stuff is not what America is. It's that big middle ground. And that's what we need to cultivate, the brotherhood. I will tell you, this thing about affirmative action and all that other stuff, I always told people, I was not a great Hispanic case officer. I was a damn good case officer. And I believe in merit dictating the things that do. But we need to work together and do away with the differences and look at the commonalities that make us the United States. I think our name says it all.
Rick, that is a perfect way to end. I can't thank you enough. What's crazy, and this happens all the time, it could be Layla Ali, in this case it's you, the humility, the things that you've done, yet you seem so normal is shocking. I think, sometimes to our system. And I just thank God for people like you. So guys, grab Black Ops. I mean, obviously we can only cover a tiny, tiny portion of Rick's unbelievable career, his dedication to the country, and just all of the incredible work that he did over decades. So I just wanted to say thank you again for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. It's much, much appreciated.
Well, I appreciate the courtesy and the platform. And I just want to highlight the fact that I am not unique in the agency. I'm one of many people in the agency. And the reason we tend to stay humble is because I personally walked in the shadow of giants that I wanted to emulate. These were our former leaders, not managers, leaders. So thank you. I take that as a very serious compliment.
You're the best, my friend. Thank you for coming on, and we will talk very soon.
I hope so. Thank you very much again, guys.
Thank you.
Great meeting you all.
Thanks, Rick.